Michael Chen sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor, staring at the stack of complaint letters on his mahogany desk. As the CEO of Supervalue, one of the largest grocery chains in the country, he had seen his fair share of customer feedback over the years. But something about these particular letters bothered him deeply. He picked up one and read it again. It was from a woman named Dorothy Williams, who wrote about how humiliated she felt during her last shopping trip. Another letter came from a man who said his elderly father refused to shop at Supervalue anymore after being treated rudely by staff. The pattern was clear, and it all pointed to one location: the Riverside Plaza store in suburban Philadelphia. Michael had built his company on a simple principle: treat every customer like family. His own grandmother had raised him after his parents passed away, and she had taught him the value of respect and kindness. The thought that elderly customers were being mistreated at one of his stores made his stomach turn. He called his assistant and told her to cancel all his meetings for the next 2 weeks. When she asked why, he simply said he had important field work to do. Michael had made his decision. He was going undercover. 3 days later, Michael stood in front of his bathroom mirror, barely recognizing himself. He had glued on a salt and pepper beard that made him look 10 years older. A pair of thick-rimmed glasses sat on his nose, and he had traded his expensive suits for worn jeans and a plain button-up shirt. He looked like any regular guy who needed a job, not the CEO of a billion-dollar company. He had set everything up carefully. His head of human resources, one of the only people who knew about his plan, had arranged for him to be hired at the Riverside Plaza store under the name Mike Thompson. The regional manager had been told this was a new corporate training program where executives experienced frontline work. Nobody at the store level would know who he really was. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Michael parked his regular sedan, not his usual luxury car, in the employee lot behind the Supervalue store. His heart pounded as he walked through the back entrance. This was really happening. He was about to spend the next 2 weeks working as a cashier in his own store. The break room smelled like old coffee and cleaning supplies. A few employees sat around a table, scrolling through their phones before their shifts started. Michael grabbed a blue employee vest from the rack and put it on. The name tag read, "Mike T. Perfect. You must be the new guy." A sharp voice cut through the room. Michael turned to see a woman in her late 30s striding toward him. She had dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything with suspicion. "I'm Karen Walsh, day shift supervisor. You report to me." Michael extended his hand. "Nice to meet you." "Mike Thompson." Karen's handshake was brief and firm. "Right. So the regional office sent over your paperwork. Says here you've got retail experience, but it's been a while. Don't worry, cashier work isn't rocket science. Just scan items, take money, and keep the line moving. That's the most important part. Keep the line moving." She emphasized those last words like they were the golden rule of grocery retail. Michael nodded, taking mental notes of everything. "Come on, I'll show you your register." Karen walked quickly, expecting him to follow. The store was already getting busy even though it had just opened. Michael noticed the layout was slightly different from what he remembered from the blueprints in his office. There were more security cameras than he had authorized. That would need investigating. Karen stopped at Register 7. "This will be your station. It's straightforward. Scan the items, the screen tells you the total. Customer pays, you give change if needed. Any questions? What if a customer needs help with something?" Michael asked. Karen rolled her eyes slightly. "Then you call for assistance over the intercom. Don't leave your register. We can't have unmanned stations during busy hours. Your job is to check people out, not be their personal shopping assistant." Something in her tone bothered Michael, but he kept his expression neutral. "Got it? Good. Oh, and one more thing." Karen leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "We get a lot of elderly customers, especially in the mornings. They take forever with everything. Counting change, finding their loyalty cards, asking questions about prices. Don't let them hold up your line. Be polite but firm. Move them along." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. "Move them along?" "Yeah, you know what I mean. Old people, they don't move fast. They complain about everything. They want to chat about their grandkids while 10 people are waiting behind them. Just keep things efficient. That's what corporate cares about. Efficiency and speed." Michael wanted to tell her right then and there that corporate, meaning him actually cared about treating customers with dignity and respect. But he bit his tongue. This was exactly why he had come. He needed to see the whole picture before making any moves. Understood, he said simply. Karen nodded, apparently satisfied. Your first customer is coming. Remember, speed is key. She walked away and Michael took his position behind the register. His first customer was a middle-aged woman with 2 kids. The transaction went smoothly. So did the next few. Michael fell into a rhythm, surprised at how repetitive the work was. Scan bag, total payment, receipt, next customer. Over and over. Around mid-morning, the flow of customers increased. Michael glanced at the line forming at his register and understood what Karen meant about efficiency. But he also noticed something else. At Register 3, an elderly man was struggling to load his groceries onto the belt. The cashier, a young guy who looked barely 20, just stood there scrolling his phone, not offering to help. At Register 5, an older woman asked the cashier a question about a sale price. The cashier sighed loudly enough for Michael to hear from 2 registers away and called for a price check with obvious irritation in her voice. This wasn't the culture he thought he had built. This wasn't the SuperValue he wanted to lead. Excuse me, can you help me? An elderly woman stood at his register looking a bit confused. She had a small cart with just a few items. Of course, Michael said warmly. Let me help you with those. As he began scanning her items, he noticed Karen watching from across the store. Her arms were crossed and she was checking her watch. The woman was moving slowly, carefully placing each item on the belt. She apologized softly, saying her arthritis made everything take longer these days. Take your time, Michael assured her. There's no rush. But even as he said it, he could feel Karen's eyes boring into him. He looked up and saw her tapping her watch and pointing at the growing line. The message was clear. Hurry up. Michael helped the elderly woman finish her transaction, packed her bags carefully, and thanked her for shopping at SuperValue. She smiled at him, a genuine smile that reminded him of his grandmother. As soon as she left, Karen appeared at his side. Mike, you're going to need to pick up the pace. I saw that transaction. Way too slow. These customers need to understand we're running a business here, not a social club. She had arthritis, Michael said quietly. She was moving as fast as she could. Karen shrugged. Not our problem. Next customer, please. And Mike, remember what I said about efficiency? She walked away, leaving Michael standing there with a sinking feeling in his chest. He had only been here a few hours, and already he had seen enough to confirm his worst fears. This was going to be a very long 2 weeks, but he was determined to see it through. Because somewhere in this store, elderly customers who reminded him of his beloved grandmother were being treated as inconveniences instead of valued human beings. And that was something Michael Chen simply could not accept. By Wednesday morning, Michael had settled into the rhythm of cashier work, but what he was witnessing made it harder to sleep at night. Every shift revealed new problems, and most of them centered around how Karen treated the store's elderly customers. It was just after 9 in the morning when he noticed an older woman shuffling slowly through the automatic doors. She used a cane and moved carefully, as if each step required thought and effort. Michael recognized her from the complaint letters on his desk. This was Dorothy Williams, the woman who had written about feeling humiliated. Dorothy made her way through the produce section, taking her time to select apples. Michael watched from his register as Karen spotted her too. The supervisor's face showed immediate annoyance. She walked over to another employee, a teenage girl named Lisa, and Michael could hear parts of their conversation. That one comes in twice a week, Karen said, not bothering to lower her voice much. Takes her 45 minutes to buy 10 items. I swear these old folks have nothing better to do than waste our time. Lisa looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Michael's jaw tightened. He kept scanning items for his current customer, but his attention was divided. 20 minutes later, Dorothy arrived at his register. She smiled at him warmly. Good morning, dear. How are you today? I'm doing well, ma'am. How are you? Michael began carefully scanning her items, making sure not to rush. Oh, you know, my knees are giving me trouble, but I can't complain. The good Lord gave me another day. Dorothy started searching through her large purse for her wallet. Her hands shook slightly as she dug through the contents. Michael noticed Karen approaching from the corner of his eye. His supervisor stood just behind Dorothy, arms crossed, watching the transaction with obvious impatience. I'm so sorry, Dorothy said. still searching her purse. I know I put my wallet in here this morning. I always do. Oh, where is it? Take your time, Michael said gently. There's no rush. But Karen had other ideas. She stepped forward and spoke directly over Dorothy's head, as if the elderly woman wasn't even there. Mike, what's the total? $43.18, Michael replied. Karen turned to Dorothy, her voice now loud and slow, as if speaking to a child. Ma'am, do you have the money or not? We have other customers waiting. Michael glanced at the line. There were exactly 2 people waiting, and neither looked impatient. Dorothy's face flushed red. Her hands trembled more as she finally found her wallet. Yes, I have it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She pulled out 3 $20 bills and handed them to Michael with shaking hands. As he counted out her change, Karen leaned in close to him and whispered, but not quietly enough. See what I mean? Old people, they take forever and then apologize like that fixes everything. Dorothy heard. Michael saw it in her eyes. The light that had been there when she greeted him dimmed. Her shoulders slumped. She took her change and her bags without making eye contact and walked away slowly, her cane tapping against the floor. Michael felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. He was here to observe, to gather evidence, but watching Dorothy leave looking so defeated made him question if he should have broken his cover right then. The afternoon brought more incidents. An elderly man asked Karen where to find sugar-free jam. Instead of directing him politely, she sighed loudly and said, Aisle 7, same place it's been for 20 years. There are signs everywhere. The man looked embarrassed and wandered off. During his lunch break, Michael sat in the employee room, eating a sandwich and listening. Karen held court at the main table, surrounded by a few other employees. She was on a roll, complaining about the morning shift. I'm telling you, we need to do something about the senior citizen situation, Karen said between bites of her salad. They come in during our busiest hours, move at a snail's pace, and then act offended when we try to keep things moving. One of the younger cashiers, a guy named Pete, nodded along. Yeah, and they always want to pay with exact change. Like, just use a card like everyone else. Karen pointed her fork at him. Exactly. And don't get me started on the ones who write checks. Who writes checks anymore? It's 2025. Michael stirred his coffee, keeping his expression neutral. Another employee, an older woman named Betty who worked in the deli section, spoke up hesitantly. I don't know, Karen. Some of them are really sweet. Mrs. Patterson always asks about my grandkids, and Mr. Rodriguez brings me peppers from his garden. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. That's great, Betty. But we're not running a community center here. We're running a business. These old folks need to understand that if they can't keep up, maybe they should shop online or have their groceries delivered. Or better yet, maybe their families should do their shopping for them. Some of them don't have family nearby, Betty said quietly. Not our problem, Karen shot back. Look, I'm not saying I hate old people. I'm just saying there should be limits. Maybe we could have a special seniors-only hour, like from 6 to 7 in the morning. Get them in and out early before the real customers arrive. Michael nearly choked on his coffee. The real customers? He set his cup down carefully, afraid his shaking hands might spill it. This was so much worse than he had imagined. Pete laughed. Seniors-only hour. That's actually not a bad idea. Like quarantine them or something. Several people laughed, though Betty and a few others looked uncomfortable. Michael stood up abruptly and threw away his trash. He needed to get out of that room before he said something that would blow his cover. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Michael went through the motions of scanning items and taking payments, but his mind was racing. He thought about his grandmother, who had passed away 5 years ago. She had been independent until the very end, insisting on doing her own shopping even when he offered to hire someone to help her. What if she had encountered someone like Karen? Someone who made her feel like a burden, like she didn't matter, like she was just in the way. The thought made him furious. Around 4 in the afternoon, an elderly man came through his line. He was probably in his 80s, wearing a veteran's cap and moving slowly with the help of a walker. He had just a few items: bread, milk, bananas, and cat food. How are you today, sir? Michael asked warmly. Can't complain, young man. Well, I could, but nobody wants to hear an old man complain. He chuckled at his own joke. As Michael scanned the items, the man tried to reach for something on a nearby shelf, a candy bar that was just out of his reach. Could you help me grab one of those? Chocolate's my one vice, and of course, Michael grabbed the candy bar and scanned it. Thank you. These knees don't work like they used to. 70 years ago, I was jumping out of airplanes. Now I can barely reach the second shelf. You were a paratrooper? Michael asked, genuinely interested. The old man's eyes lit up. Sure was. 82nd Airborne, Korea, and Vietnam. They chatted for just a minute while Michael bagged his items carefully, putting the bread on top so it wouldn't get crushed. But that minute was apparently too long for Karen. She appeared beside them, her voice sharp. Mike, you need to keep the line moving. Save the conversations for after work? The veteran looked startled. Michael glanced at the line. There were 3 people waiting and none of them looked bothered. Yes, ma'am, Michael said, handing the veteran his receipt. As the old man walked away, Karen leaned in close. I know you're new, but you need to learn. These old-timers will talk your ear off if you let them. They're lonely and bored, and they think we're here to be their friends. We're not. We're here to check them out and move on to the next customer. Got it? Michael looked at her directly. He's a war veteran. I don't care if he's the president. Keep your line moving. Karen walked away without another word. That evening, as Michael drove home still wearing his fake beard, he couldn't stop thinking about everything he had witnessed. It wasn't just Karen's comments, though those were bad enough. It was the culture she had created. She had convinced at least some of the staff that elderly customers were problems to be managed, rather than people to be respected. He thought about Dorothy's embarrassment, the veteran being cut off mid-sentence, and all the little moments of disrespect he had observed. Each one seemed small on its own, but together they painted a picture of systematic mistreatment. Michael sat in his parked car outside his house for a long moment. He had come undercover to observe, to understand the scope of the problem. But with each passing day, it became harder to just watch. Every fiber of his being wanted to reveal who he was and fix things immediately. But he knew he couldn't. Not yet. He needed to see more, to understand exactly how deep this problem went. Because when he did finally reveal himself, he wanted to have all the facts. He wanted to make changes that would last, not just fire one bad supervisor and hope for the best. Still, as he walked into his empty house that night, Michael wondered how many more days he could stand to watch elderly people being treated as inconveniences in stores that bore his name. How many more times could he smile politely while Karen said things that made his blood boil? He had told himself he would give it 2 weeks. But after only 3 days, he was already counting down the time until he could take off this disguise and start making things right. The question was, could he make it that long without losing his temper? Friday afternoon arrived with dark clouds threatening rain. Michael had made it through almost a full week undercover, and each day had been harder than the last. He had filled 3 notebooks with observations, documenting every incident, every cruel comment, every moment of disrespect he witnessed. But nothing had prepared him for what was about to happen. The store was busy, as it always was on Friday afternoons, people rushing in after work to grab groceries for the weekend. Michael's register line moved steadily until he saw an elderly man entering the store. The man wore a faded military jacket despite the warm weather, and Michael could see various service pins attached to it. He pushed a shopping cart slowly, methodically moving through each aisle. This was Robert Patterson, though Michael didn't know his name yet. The man looked to be in his early 80s with white hair and weathered hands that shook slightly as he reached for items on the shelves. Michael watched him shop carefully, noting how he checked the price of everything before putting it in his cart. 40 minutes later, Robert arrived at Michael's register. His cart was full, probably a week's worth of groceries. He smiled at Michael, the kind of genuine smile that came from someone who still believed in basic human kindness. Afternoon, son. Busy day for you, I bet. Yes, sir, but that's all right. Let me help you with these. Michael began scanning items, noticing that everything Robert bought was practical. No luxury items, just basics. Bread, canned soup, coffee, eggs, some vegetables, cereal, milk. Robert chatted pleasantly while Michael worked. I usually shop on Tuesdays, but I had a doctor's appointment this week. Had to move things around. You know how it is. I understand completely, Michael said, carefully bagging the eggs so they wouldn't break. The total came to $87.43. Robert pulled out his wallet and retrieved his debit card. He inserted it into the card reader and waited. A moment later, the screen flashed red. Transaction declined. Robert's smile faded. That's strange. Let me try again. He tried twice more. Each time the same result declined. I don't understand, Robert said, his voice now tinged with embarrassment. My pension check should have been deposited yesterday. It always comes on Thursday. Michael kept his voice gentle. Sometimes banks take an extra day to process things, especially if there's a holiday. It might go through tomorrow. But I need these groceries. Robert's hands trembled as he looked at the full bags. I don't have anything at home. I waited until today because I knew my check was coming. Other customers in line were starting to notice. Some looked sympathetic, others impatient. Michael saw Karen's head snap up from across the store. She had a sixth sense for situations like this, and she was already walking over. Maybe I could put some things back, Robert said quietly, his cheeks reddening. Just keep the bread and the soup and the cat food. My cat Buttons, she needs to eat. Sir, we can figure this out, Michael started to say, but Karen had arrived. What's the problem here? Karen's voice cut through the moment like a knife. His card was declined, Michael explained. We're just working out what to do. Karen looked at Robert, then at the full bags of groceries, then at the line of waiting customers. Michael could practically see the calculations running through her head. This was taking too long. This was holding up her precious efficiency metrics. Sir, if you can't pay, you can't take the groceries. It's that simple. Karen's voice was loud enough that people 3 registers over could hear. Robert nodded, mortified. I understand. I'll just put things back. I'm sorry for the trouble. That's what happens when people don't keep track of their finances, Karen said. And Michael couldn't believe she was saying this out loud. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Seniors need to have their affairs in order before they come shopping. The words hung in the air like poison. Michael saw Robert's face crumble. The old man's eyes grew shiny with tears he was trying desperately to hold back. I served this country for 30 years, Robert said quietly, his voice shaking. I've never missed a payment in my life. My bank made a mistake, that's all. Karen was unmoved. That's great, but we can't accept thank you for your service as payment. Mike, start removing items from the bags. We need to clear this line. Something inside Michael snapped. He had watched enough. He had documented enough. This had gone too far. I'll pay for it, Michael said firmly. Karen turned to him, her eyes narrowing. What? I said I'll pay for his groceries. All of them. Michael pulled out his personal credit card, the one under his real name, though he kept it angled so Karen couldn't see the name printed on it. Absolutely not, Karen said sharply. That's against store policy. Employees are not allowed to purchase items for customers. It enables bad behavior. Bad behavior. Michael's voice rose slightly. This man's bank made an error. That's not bad behavior. You don't get to make that call, Mike. You're a cashier, not a manager, and you're certainly not authorized to break policy. Karen crossed her arms. If you pay for these groceries, I'll write you up. This is your first week. Do you really want a disciplinary action in your file already? The line of customers behind Robert had grown. People were watching the confrontation unfold. Some had their phones out. Michael didn't care. Write me up then, he said. I'm paying for his groceries. Robert grabbed Michael's arm gently. Son, you don't have to do this. I don't want you getting in trouble for me. I'll just come back tomorrow. Michael looked at the elderly veteran, at the shame in his eyes, at the way his hands shook, at the military pins on his jacket. He thought about his grandmother. He thought about every elderly customer who had been made to feel small and worthless in this store over the past week. Sir, with all due respect, I do have to do this. Michael ran his credit card through the reader before Karen could stop him. The transaction approved immediately. Karen's face turned red with anger. Fine, you just earned yourself a written warning, Mike. In fact, give me your vest. You're suspended for the rest of the day. I'll deal with your paperwork on Monday. That's fine, Michael said calmly. He started to remove his vest, but first he finished loading Robert's groceries into bags. Let me help you to your car, Michael said to Robert. You really don't have to, the old man protested, but his voice was grateful. I want to. Michael picked up the heaviest bags and walked with Robert through the store. Karen watched them go, shaking her head and muttering something about bleeding hearts and entitled employees. Outside, the threatened rain had started as a light drizzle. Robert's car was an old sedan parked near the back of the lot. As they loaded the groceries into the trunk, Robert turned to Michael with tears running down his weathered cheeks. I don't know how to thank you. I really don't. Do you know what it's like to stand there and have someone talk to you like you're nothing? Like because you're old, you don't matter anymore? Michael's throat tightened. I can imagine. That woman, that supervisor, she's always like that. Not just to me, to all of us older folks. We talk about it sometimes in the senior center. About how we don't like shopping here anymore. But this is the only grocery store within walking distance. Most of us don't drive much anymore. Robert wiped his eyes. My wife passed away 3 years ago. I live alone now with just my cat. This store, it's my connection to the outside world, you know? I come here twice a week just to feel like I'm still part of things. But lately it just makes me feel invisible. Or worse, like I'm a burden. Michael felt his carefully maintained cover starting to crack. He wanted so badly to tell this man who he was, to promise that things would change immediately. But he held back. Just a little longer. What's your name, sir? Michael asked. Robert Patterson. Most folks call me Bob. Bob, I promise you something. Things are going to change around here. That supervisor, the way she treats people, it's not right and it won't continue. Will you trust me on that? Robert studied Michael's face for a long moment. I don't know why, but I believe you. What's your name? Mike, Michael said, which was technically true. And I need to ask you something. This store? The way the staff treats elderly customers, has it been going on for a long time? At least a year, maybe more. Ever since that Karen became supervisor, she's made it clear she doesn't want us around. Some of my friends have started taking the bus to the store 2 miles away just to avoid her. Michael nodded slowly, filing away every word. Bob, would you be willing to write down your experience? What happened today, and anything else you've experienced here? You thinking of reporting her? Robert asked. Something like that. Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notepad and pencil. His hand still shook, but he wrote down his phone number and address. You call me anytime. I'll tell you everything. And I can get other folks to talk too. We've all got stories. They shook hands and Michael watched Robert drive away carefully. Then he walked back toward the store entrance, rain soaking through his shirt. He stood there for a moment, water dripping down his fake beard, looking through the windows at his store. His company. His responsibility. Karen was visible inside, talking to another employee and gesturing animatedly. Probably telling the story of the cashier who had defied her, who she had to suspend. She looked pleased with herself, like she had won some kind of victory. Monday morning arrived with clear skies, but inside the Riverside Plaza SuperValue, confusion filled the air. Employees arrived for their shifts to find a notice taped to the break room door. Mandatory all-staff meeting at 8 a.m., no exceptions. The store wouldn't open until after the meeting concluded. Karen stood near the coffee maker looking annoyed. This is ridiculous. Corporate never gives us notice for these things. I've got a store to run. We're losing money every minute we stay closed. Betty from the deli section poured herself coffee quietly. Maybe it's important. Important enough to close the store? I doubt it. Karen checked her watch. And where's Mike? He was supposed to come in today to receive his written warning. I specifically told him to be here at 7:30. Maybe he quit, Pete suggested. You did suspend him on his first week. Karen shrugged. Then he wasn't cut out for retail anyway. We need people with thick skin, not bleeding hearts who want to save every customer who claims they can't pay. At exactly 8 a.m., the break room was packed. Cashiers, stock clerks, deli workers, managers, and department supervisors all crowded in. The regional manager, Tom Stevens, stood at the front of the room looking nervous. Beside him stood someone no one recognized, a man in an expensive dark suit, clean-shaven with styled hair and an air of authority. All right, everyone, let's settle down, Tom said, his voice shaky. I know this is unusual, closing the store for a meeting, but we have someone very important here today. This is Michael Chen, the CEO of SuperValue. The room went silent. Every eye turned to the man in the suit. Karen's expression shifted from annoyance to sudden attention. She straightened her posture and put on a smile. This was the big boss, the man who ran the entire company. This was her chance to make a good impression. Michael stepped forward and his eyes swept across the room. He saw Karen's fake smile, Pete's curious expression, Betty's confused face, and about 20 other employees all wondering why the CEO would visit their store. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Michael's voice was calm but firm. I'm going to tell you a story. About a week and a half ago, I became concerned about complaints we were receiving from customers at this location. Specifically, complaints about how elderly customers were being treated. Karen's smile didn't waver, though her eyes flickered with something that might have been worry. She probably figured this was just a generic corporate speech about customer service. So I decided to see for myself what was happening. Michael continued. I went undercover. I disguised myself, used a fake name, and worked here as a cashier for the past week. The room erupted in whispers. Employees looked at each other in shock. Karen's smile froze on her face. Some of you knew me as Mike Thompson. Michael pulled out a photo from his pocket, the employee ID photo taken on his first day, complete with fake beard and glasses. He held it up. This was me. I worked Register 7. I attended the staff meetings. I listened to break room conversations, and I watched how customers were treated in this store. Karen's face had gone pale. Michael could see her mind racing, probably trying to remember every interaction she'd had with Mike, every comment she'd made in his presence. Let me be very clear about what I observed, Michael said, his voice growing stronger. I watched elderly customers being rushed, dismissed, and humiliated. I heard staff members complain about seniors being too slow, too confused, too much trouble. I witnessed a culture where efficiency was valued over human dignity. He pulled out his 3 notebooks and held them up. I documented everything, every incident, every disrespectful comment, every moment where an elderly customer was made to feel like they didn't matter. Betty had tears in her eyes. A few of the younger employees stared at the floor looking ashamed. Karen stood frozen, her fake smile completely gone now. On Friday, I watched an 82-year-old military veteran named Robert Patterson try to buy groceries. His bank had delayed his pension deposit by 1 day. His debit card was declined through no fault of his own. And in front of other customers, he was lectured about keeping his finances in order. He was made to feel ashamed. This man served our country for 30 years, and he was treated like a burden in one of my stores. Michael's voice carried emotion now. Real anger barely held in check. When I offered to pay for his groceries myself, I was told I would be written up. I was told it was against policy to help him. I was suspended for showing basic human kindness. Several employees gasped. They hadn't heard about Friday's incident yet. Karen opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. So let me tell you what SuperValue's actual policy is, Michael said, his eyes moving across the room. Our policy is to treat every customer with respect and dignity, regardless of their age, regardless of how fast they move, regardless of how long they take to count their change. Our policy is to remember that behind every transaction is a human being who deserves to be treated like they matter. He paused, letting his words sink in. Because they do matter. Every single one of them. The elderly woman who takes 5 minutes to find her wallet matters. The veteran who wants to share a story about his service matters. The senior citizen who asks where to find an item matters. They built this country. They raised families. They worked hard their entire lives. And now, in what should be their golden years, some of them are being made to feel invisible or inconvenient when they just want to buy groceries. Betty was openly crying now. Even some of the employees who had laughed along with Karen's comments looked uncomfortable. Michael turned his attention directly to Karen. Ms. Walsh, I need you to explain something to me. In the break room last Wednesday, you suggested we should have a seniors-only hour in the morning to, and I quote, get them in and out early before the real customers arrive. Can you explain to me who you consider to be the real customers? Karen's mouth opened and closed. Her face had gone from pale to red. I was just joking. It was break room talk. You didn't mean it? Michael's voice was sharp now. So when you told Dorothy Williams to hurry up because old people take forever, that was a joke? When you refused to help an elderly man reach an item on a high shelf and suggested he should shop online if he can't manage independently, that was a joke? When you told me that seniors are time wasters who complain about everything, was that also a joke? I was trying to maintain efficiency, Karen said weakly. Corporate always pushes us about transaction times and customer flow. I was just trying to meet the metrics. Show me where in any corporate communication I ever said that efficiency matters more than treating people with respect, Michael challenged. Show me where I told you to humiliate customers to save 30 seconds. Karen had no answer. I'll save you the trouble of looking, Michael said. I never said that. Because it's not what this company stands for. It's not what I stand for. And it's certainly not what our customers deserve. He took a breath, composing himself. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but no less firm. Karen Walsh, your employment with SuperValue is terminated. Effective immediately. Tom will handle your exit paperwork. You'll receive your severance package, but you will never work for this company again. Karen's eyes went wide. You can't. I've been here for 12 years. You can't fire me for trying to do my job. I'm not firing you for doing your job, Michael said calmly. I'm firing you for failing to understand what your job actually was. Your job was never just about moving customers through checkout lines. Your job was to create an environment where every person who walks through those doors feels valued and respected. You failed at that in every possible way. Security guards who had been waiting outside entered the break room. Karen looked around wildly as if searching for support, but no one met her eyes. Even Pete, who had often agreed with her complaints, was staring at his shoes. This isn't fair, Karen said, her voice breaking. I was just being efficient. I was just trying to meet standards. No, Michael said quietly. You were being cruel. There's a difference. Karen was escorted out, still protesting. The room remained silent as the door closed behind her. Michael turned back to the remaining employees. I know some of you agreed with Karen's attitudes. Some of you laughed at her comments. Some of you treated elderly customers poorly because you thought that's what was expected. I want you to understand something right now. That behavior ends today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. He let that sink in before continuing. But I also know that some of you were uncomfortable with what you saw. Some of you treated customers kindly even when it wasn't the popular thing to do. I noticed you, Betty. I saw how you always smiled at the older customers, how you asked about their families, how you made them feel welcome. I saw you, Rita, helping an elderly woman reach items without being asked. I saw you, James, patiently explaining sale prices to a confused customer without any trace of annoyance. The employees he mentioned looked surprised but pleased. We're going to make changes, Michael announced. Company-wide training on empathy and respect. A senior appreciation program. Volunteers to help customers who need assistance. Reserved parking spots close to the entrance for elderly and disabled shoppers. A direct hotline for customers to report any mistreatment. That afternoon, Michael drove to the address Robert Patterson had written down for him. It was a small apartment complex on the east side of town, the kind of place where retired folks lived on fixed incomes. The building was old but well-maintained, with a small garden out front where someone had planted tomatoes and marigolds. Michael found apartment 2B and knocked gently. He could hear shuffling inside, then the sound of locks being turned. Robert opened the door, still wearing his military jacket. His eyes went wide with recognition. Mike, what are you doing here? Did you get fired because of me? Robert's face filled with worry. I've been thinking about Friday all weekend. I felt terrible that you got in trouble. Can I come in, Bob? I need to talk to you. Robert stepped aside and Michael entered a small, tidy apartment. Pictures covered the walls, mostly old photographs of Robert in uniform. Robert with a pretty woman who must have been his wife, and various shots of what looked like family gatherings from years past. A large orange cat sat on the windowsill watching Michael with suspicious eyes. That's Buttons, Robert said. She doesn't like strangers much. Coffee? Sure, thank you. Michael sat on the worn couch while Robert moved slowly to the kitchen. The old man's hand still shook slightly as he poured coffee into two mismatched mugs. I want to start by apologizing to you, Michael said when Robert handed him the coffee and settled into a recliner across from him. Apologizing? Son, you paid for my groceries. You stood up for me. If anyone should apologize, it's that supervisor. Michael took a deep breath. Bob, I need to tell you something. My name isn't Mike Thompson. It's Michael Chen. I'm the CEO of SuperValue. Robert's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. He stared at Michael for a long moment, processing this information. The CEO? You mean the owner of the whole company? Yes. I went undercover at that store because we were getting complaints about how elderly customers were being treated. I needed to see it for myself, and what I saw was worse than I imagined. Robert set his mug down carefully. So when you were working that register, you were really the CEO, yes. And everything that happened to you on Friday, that never should have happened. Not in my store, not anywhere. Michael's voice was heavy with regret. You deserved better. All the seniors who shopped there deserved better. What about that supervisor? Karen? Robert asked. I fired her this morning, called an all-staff meeting and told everyone what I'd witnessed. She doesn't work for SuperValue anymore. Robert leaned back in his chair, absorbing this. Good. That woman made shopping feel like punishment. My friends and we'd talk about it at the senior center, how we dreaded going there. But it's the only store close enough to walk to. Some of us don't drive anymore. I know, and that's going to change. I'm implementing new policies company-wide, training for all staff on treating customers with respect, a senior appreciation program, volunteers to help with shopping, reserved parking close to the entrance, and a direct hotline where customers can report any problems. Michael pulled out an envelope from his jacket. But I also wanted to do something personal. This is a lifetime SuperValue VIP card, free delivery service whenever you need it, and a year's worth of grocery credits to make up for what you experienced. Robert's eyes filled with tears. You didn't have to do all that. Yes, I did. Bob, when I saw you standing at that register, being humiliated in front of other people, it broke something in me. My grandmother raised me. She passed away 5 years ago, but she taught me that every person deserves dignity and respect. Watching what happened to you, I kept thinking about her. What if someone had treated her that way? Your grandmother raised you right, Robert said quietly. But you know what? The money and the cards, that's nice. But what really matters is that you listened. You cared enough to see what was happening. Most big company bosses, they sit in their fancy offices and never see the real problems. That's why I went undercover. Sometimes you have to get down in the trenches to understand what's really going on. They talked for over an hour. Robert shared stories about his late wife, Helen, who had loved to cook and always made a big deal about grocery shopping, treating it like an adventure. He talked about his military service, about jumping out of planes when he was young and fearless. He talked about his cat Buttons, who he'd adopted after Helen passed away because the apartment felt too quiet without her. You know what the worst part was? Robert said at one point. It wasn't even the being treated badly. It was feeling invisible. Like because I'm old and slow, I don't matter anymore. Like I'm just in the way of all the important people who have places to be. You're not in the way, Bob, and you matter. Every customer who walks through those doors matters, but especially the ones who've lived full lives and have stories to tell. That's something I'm going to make sure every employee understands. Before Michael left, Robert walked him to the door. The old veteran stood a little straighter now, his handshake firm. You're a good man, Michael Chen. Your grandmother would be proud. I hope so, Michael said. And Bob, you come back to that store anytime. If anyone treats you with anything less than respect, you call me directly. He handed Robert a business card with his personal cell phone number written on the back. I will, and thank you. Not just for the groceries or the cards or any of that. Thank you for caring. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of change. Michael didn't just implement new policies at the Riverside Plaza store. He rolled them out across every SuperValue location in the country. Every single employee, from cashiers to store managers to regional directors, went through mandatory training on empathy, dignity, and customer service. The Senior Appreciation Program launched with volunteers at each store specifically assigned to help elderly customers. These weren't just employees doing it as part of their job. These were people who genuinely wanted to help, who understood that a few extra minutes spent assisting someone could make their entire day better. Michael also started a mystery shopper program, but with a twist. He hired seniors to visit stores and report on their experiences. They weren't looking for problems to get people in trouble. They were looking for employees who went above and beyond, who made customers feel valued. Those employees received bonuses and recognition. Betty thrived as the new supervisor at Riverside Plaza. Under her leadership, the store's customer satisfaction scores skyrocketed. Elderly customers who had stopped shopping there started coming back. Dorothy Williams, the woman Michael had helped during his first week undercover, told her friends at the senior center that SuperValue felt welcoming again. Pete, the young cashier who had laughed at Karen's cruel jokes, came to Michael personally one day to apologize. I didn't realize how hurtful those comments were, he said. My grandfather lives with us now, and after what happened, I started noticing how people treat him when we're out. I get it now. I'm sorry I was part of the problem. Michael appreciated the apology and kept Pete on staff. People could change if they wanted to. Pete became one of the best employees at the store, known for his patience and kindness with all customers. 6 months after the undercover operation, Michael received a letter. It was from Robert Patterson, written in shaky handwriting on lined paper. Dear Michael, it read, I wanted you to know that I went shopping at SuperValue yesterday. A young employee named Rita saw me struggling to reach something on a high shelf. Without me even asking, she got it down for me and asked if there was anything else I needed. She helped me with my entire shopping trip, talking to me like I was a person, not a burden. I told her about what happened 6 months ago, and she said things are different now because the CEO cares about doing things right. I wanted you to know she was right. Things are different. Thank you for that. Your friend, Bob. Michael pinned that letter to the wall in his office right next to his grandmother's photograph. It stayed there as a reminder of why he had gone undercover, why he had taken a risk, why he had been willing to see the truth even when it was uncomfortable. The company's profits increased too, which surprised some of the board members who had worried that all these new programs would cost too much. But Michael had known something they hadn't quite understood. When you treat people with dignity and respect, when you make them feel valued, they come back. They tell their friends. They become loyal customers not just because of your prices or your products, but because of how you make them feel. Other companies started asking Michael about his undercover experience. Business magazines wanted interviews. Leadership conferences wanted him to speak. But Michael always told the same story. The one about Robert Patterson standing at a register, being humiliated for a banking error, and how that moment had changed everything. Leadership isn't about sitting in an office making decisions based on reports and numbers, Michael would say. Real leadership means being willing to see the truth even when it's ugly. It means listening to the people who matter most, your customers and your frontline employees. And it means having the courage to make changes when you discover things aren't right. A year after his undercover operation, Michael visited the Riverside Plaza store again. This time he didn't wear a disguise.